Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm playing setup chess, where you and your opponent can spend 39 points of material to build a position anywhere on the first 3 ranks. Then play out the game. My goal is to win 5 games. Let's get started with game number 1. Last time I played this, a lot of you guys suggested some pretty interesting strategies, and the first strategy was to spam pawns. So if we have 39 points of material and we just put down a bunch of pawns, that's 3 by 8, we can put down 24 pawns. So that doesn't actually add up. Instead, I'm going to put down as many pawns as it makes sense. There's no way that my opponent is doing the exact same strategy. Okay, that's kind of funny. We're going to go ahead and do 2 layers worth of pawns, and I'll probably supplement the back rank with like some bishops, and obviously I have to place my king somewhere down there as well. Okay, my opponent is now putting down some minor pieces. I will continue moving forward with my pawns. Sure, more pawns, sure. And with that, we wrap up 2 layers worth of pawns, which I think is probably all we need. And actually, it won't even allow me to put pawns on the back rank anyways. So, okay, that works out neatly. We have enough so that every pawn has a couple of defenders on the rank behind it. I'm going to go ahead and put my king, well, I'll put my king down last so my opponent doesn't know where to look. And I'll probably just supplement it with bishops. I'm going to alternate light and dark colored bishops in case it does come down to needing one of each color. And our opponent has 10 points left to work with. We have 17. So if I put down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more bishops, I'd actually only use 15 points worth of material. And if I put down a rook, let's see, I would have 12 points, and then the last one would be a rook, which would be worth 5, so that works out nicely. I will put my rook, I guess it doesn't really matter. I'm gonna go ahead and put my bishops down first, and I guess I'll put my rook in the center with my king. That probably makes the most sense. Okay, king lands on f1. I don't think that actually changes any part of my strategy, so we'll keep dropping those bishops. Okay, bishop to g2, sure, more bishops. I believe I'll have the same number of light and dark squared bishops now, so king and rook here, pretty much wherever, and then we can start the game. Let's go ahead and place the king here. Just put the rook on the king side for good luck, and we're ready to go. Nice. We've used up exactly 39 points of material. Our opponent starts by charging in the center, and since that's where all of our bishops are pointing, I assume that we're ready to do the exact same. I have to admit, I don't really know how this turns into a victory for me, other than the fact that I have a rook. So we get c4. I'm going to go ahead and just play c6, defend my center. f4 puts a little bit more pressure on that d5 pawn, so I can't really push or else I lose it. Let's go ahead and do this horde style where we just kind of push pawns. So I'll start with d6. Right, we get knight to c3. This could be a good opportunity to play d4. Nobody's defending d4. Gets my pawn out of the way. We boot the knight with tempo. Nice, the knight goes back to where it developed from. Let's play e5 to defend this square. Okay, takes. We'll go ahead and take towards the center. And in a moment, we're probably looking at e6, d5. Nice, c3, which challenges my d4 pawn. I could play c5. There's not enough bishops attacking b7. I am well defended, but it's a little bit unclear how this bishop actually gets into the game. So it's a minor concern. I will play c5 anyways, with the idea that this pawn structure is doing a really good job of keeping these knights undeveloped. Okay, e3 stacks more pressure on d4. If takes, I lose. Well, actually, no, I don't lose the pawn, do I? So maybe it's okay. And then I can just supplement it with e5. So let's play g5 with the idea of getting these pieces out. Okay, knight to c2, now it's enough pressure, but I can play g6, which gives that extra defender that we need on d4. Knight to e2, let's go ahead and make this little battery. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 attackers on the pawn, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4 defenders on the pawn, so should be totally fine. h4 challenges our g5 pawn. So far, I feel like grabbing more space has been advantageous for us, so I'm going to play g4 with the idea of h5. Okay, takes. Let's go ahead and take back towards the center. b4, it's clear that I'm grabbing more space in the center, and my opponent's going for a sort of queenside break. Let's play f5, and maybe I can get an f4 push and back it up with my rook. Okay, b3, so my opponent's idea was really just to unleash the bishop on that pawn. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that weakness. It's kind of becoming a liability for me. Okay, my opponent recaptures. Let's play h5, kind of solidify our pawn structure on the king side. We get bishop to b2. We have that battery, so there are some ideas of d4. f4 is also a possibility. En passant, opponent takes back. And this is quite a uncomfortable position. I'm not sure how I'm supposed to develop any of these queenside pieces without losing to this bishop battery. So maybe in the future, if I put down a bunch of pawns, I should also put down batteries and look across the board. Let's go ahead and try a5. See if I can start undoing this kind of mess that I have on the queen side. Okay, my opponent allows us to take, sure. If a5 again, then we get knight to d5, centralizes the knight, but breaks off the bishop battery. And since the knight doesn't actually threaten anything, maybe we can try to trade. So let's give that a shot. a5. Opponent moves back, so we still have this weakness. I might even be looking to just sacrifice here, like b5, for example, to get this bishop out. I don't want to get too desperate too early, though. I'm down to almost a minute. Let's go ahead and move the king over so we have another defender, get this bishop out. Maybe do this, and we can kind of untangle our position. Let's take. That'll break the battery for certain. Nice. We'll bring our bishop out the same way. f4, there's no more en passant. If takes, there are enough defenders, so let's go ahead and just play this. Maybe we can trade out of this doubled pawn situation and get these bishops active. I'll go ahead and pre-move that recapture, actually. Okay, nice. We do get that trade, and I think that's in our favor. Okay, knight clearly coming to f3 to put more pressure on e5. I'm going to go ahead and play rook to d8, trying to grab d3 and the weak knights behind it. Okay, knight to e1 does defend that square. I'll play c5. Maybe I can trade off this bishop. Well, actually, I don't want to trade off that bishop. Okay, I will probably end up moving my king out of the way so that this bishop can defend e5 as well. And in the perfect world, I might actually bring my king all the way over to f7 to have enough defenders on this bishop that I can actually just move the pawn out of the way. Okay, bishop to g2, I'm fine with the trade. Oh, and actually, I don't have to drag my king all the way over. I can just play bishop to f6. I add that extra defender in the form of the pawn, and at any point, I can probably just move this pawn. So what if I play e4 right now? Opponent can't take because rook takes the free knight. If I play and then we get this trade, takes, that should be totally fine. So let's play e4. Down to 44 seconds. We are playing 5-2 time control. So 5 minutes starting base time and then 2 extra seconds of increment for every move that we play. Okay, bishop takes. I'll go ahead and take back. Sure, take back once more. Still can't take my pawn and I'm looking to trade it off. Oh, did I even notice that we're playing an 1800 rated player? So this individual has some experience for certain playing setup chess. We get knight to f1. Still can't take, though, because I still take the knight behind it. So let's do this. Move my king forward so I can activate my bishop. Maybe g5 at some point. I want to kind of open up the position. Okay, now I have to trade off this pawn. It has too many attackers. And my opponent is playing with 4 knights, and I have 2 bishops and a rook. So based off my pieces, all of these pieces prefer open positions. And based off my opponent's pieces, all knights, obviously, my opponent would rather play a closed position, for example, like what we have here on the queen side, because my bishop has a hard time traversing through this kind of terrain, whereas a knight can just do a couple of jumps and end up in a really good spot. So I'm going to try to open up the position, at least down the middle and on the king side. Let's play h6 with the idea of bishop here and then f4. I'm down to 21 seconds, which is not great. I just have to keep my eyes peeled for any free pieces. I probably have to play quickly. Only reason I'm not pre-moving this is just in case my opponent captures. Although I'm pretty confident this will be my next move anyways. Sure, let's go ahead and develop the bishop. I'm going to try my best to force a breakthrough on the king side, maybe rook here, with the idea of taking and lining up the rook and the bishop on g3. And if either of these knights moves, then we have f4, nice, putting extra pressure on the knight, which only has 1 defender. So now my opponent basically has to move the knight, and then I can take this free pawn. I guess my opponent could risk it for the biscuit and take here. We trade off on d3, and then there's this free pawn. Could be a little bit interesting. My opponent's almost equalizing the time, which should be good for me. I'm generally comfortable playing faster, but I don't want to put my foot in my mouth either. There's even ideas here of g4, f3, I've just realized. Let's try that, g4 with the idea of maybe f3. Maybe I just take on e3. I'm not really sure what's better at this point. I probably don't want to allow my opponent to sacrifice a bunch of knights for these 2 pawns, or rather 1 knight for those 2 pawns. Okay, time situation is definitely evening out. I'm going to go ahead and take this, maybe bishop to e4 check. Rook to d2 also looks really good. Okay, I now have officially more time than my opponent does, which is a miracle in and of itself. But okay, knight there, let's go ahead and pin it to the king. I'm assuming the king will come over and defend it. Then we can target this knight that doesn't have anybody to defend it, and it doesn't have a way out either. 4 seconds for my opponent. My opponent doesn't seem to be in any particular rush. All right, let's play exactly that. I think both me and my opponent realized or forgot. Oh, nice. Okay, opponent flags. I was going to say I think both of us forgot that this knight was actually defending the knight on e2. Also, I apologize for the fact that clearly you can see the setup was messed up. I don't know why. For setup chess, when you finish a game, everything shuffles over to the left. And then when you start a new game, everything shuffles back over to the right. I've been tinkering with it. I don't know how to fix it. But with that, we win game number 1. Let's go ahead and move on to game number 2. All right, game number 2. I didn't really love the pawn strategy. That felt like a very slow, trudging game. We did win in the end, and we got to apply a couple of real chess concepts, but I'm not the biggest fan of it. Okay, bishop here, sure. So this time, another strategy that a lot of you guys recommended was just spamming bishops, because bishop seems to be the best bang for your buck, I guess is the right way to say it. You only use 3 points, but they have great scope across the whole position. So I'm going to set bishops up on either side, and I'd like to do batteries as well, which seems to be what my opponent is trying to do as well. Sure, set up our bishops, and if my opponent insists on this, I might just put a couple of pawns in front to kind of cap off our batteries. Let's place bishops in the corners as well. Nice. Okay, this is going to be a very, very strange trade-off. Can already tell on that first move, we're going to be doing an insane number of different trades. If we continue at this pace, though, I should be the one to move first. I might even drop a queen for the sole purpose of ensuring that I go first, right? Because that would mean my opponent puts down their pieces last, and then I get to move first. I have 9 points. Let's put down a queen, or rather my king over here, and see what my opponent's idea is. Okay, my opponent's idea is just to put down a bunch of bishops. Got it. Interesting thing is, I don't know where my opponent's king will go. Let's see, we also have this kind of scary prospect that I don't win that exchange, but I can evenly trade over here. So I'm going to put down my queen right now and allow my opponent to place the rest of their pieces, naturally their bishops, and we'll see how this works out. I'm going to play based off wherever the king lands. Okay, and we get, oh no, that is horrible. Wow. I should have committed to full bishops and not adding that silly queen at the end. Okay, because now we're put in check. I have to move out of the way, and then basically immediately I lose the queen. Okay, let's just move the king out of the way. It's not like I really have a choice. I'm not sure what I'm calculating for. Let's take on f6. I'd rather weaken my opponent's king. That's probably going to be our best chance at winning back any of this material. Okay, we do get the recapture. Let's take with check. Okay, we get the block. If I take here, opponent just takes, so I do have to take back with check. Sure, now we go in for the trade, and it looks like I'm just down material. I see no upside, 0 to having put that queen down, so for the next game, I'm just going to put all the bishops down. Sure, it looks like we're just trading off. I really just need to get rid of my opponent's 2 dark squared bishops, and then I can guarantee a draw. So let's play this and try to trade. Okay, we're put in check. Let's move out of the way and target this bishop again. If bishop b2, we can play check. I know we're hanging this bishop right now, but again, if I can just get rid of these 2 dark squared bishops, it's a theoretical draw anyways, so. Okay, bishop back to a3. My opponent seems to have a relatively clear idea of what's happening. Let's play check. If king back to f8, we have that fork again. If king forward, check. King forward, okay, we do get the fork, nice. With that, we force the trade, and now there's one more bishop that I have to get rid of. All right, before I do that, I'm gonna go ahead and trade off this bishop that's being targeted. And now, I'm not really sure what the best way to go about this is. I probably should just try to trade off as many bishops as possible so I don't get checkmated by accident. Okay, sure, we take back with check. Opponent's king has to move out of the way. Sweet, let's play check, trade off this bishop as well. Nice. And now I just have to somehow trade this bishop off without allowing my opponent to checkmate me. We'll see if my opponent's interested in what is basically a draw offer. Okay, definitely not. My opponent moves back. The hardest part about checkmating with bishops is keeping the king on the side of the board and then eventually sticking it in the corner. So I'm going to do my best to make that a huge headache. Oh, wow, I can't even move forward because check, and then I lose the bishop. But I am going to try my best to make this a huge headache. Sure, let's block it with my bishop. Surely my opponent doesn't want to trade. Okay, let's play this. Hit the bishop, try to move forward to b4. Okay, sure, connect the bishops. Check forces me in here, but doesn't seem to force mate in any way. Oh, that would be kind of funny if my opponent played bishop c5 and then I played this and then mate. That would have been quite funny. But opponent gives another check. Sure, let's move back. Maybe my opponent will see this idea. Okay, king to c6, so definitely not. Well, it's similar. If I play this, then there's still checkmate. So I'll just move my bishop out of the way. That should be okay. As long as I keep the bishop on this diagonal, there shouldn't be a way to checkmate me. King to c5. Let's play check. King moves back. I move back as well. Check again. Sure. Threefold repetition. King moves forward, which allows this. So I do get a chance to escape. King moves over. Let's just keep the bishop on the same diagonal. All right, and my opponent does accept my draw offer. With that, we draw game number 2, but that does not count as a win. So let's move on to game number 3. All right, I'm going to go ahead and give the bishop strategy the fair chance that it actually deserved, because that was not fair. Let's just spam a bunch of bishops. Okay, my opponent seems to have no rhyme or reason, so I'm going to point all of my bishops at their side of the board, and then I'm probably just going to put my king in the corner. So let's just do bishops. Let's purist, right? All the bishops that we can find, we'll put them on the board. Sure, more bishops. Small problem, my opponent will go first, but this seems to be well defended enough that it might not be an issue. Okay, trapping my opponent's own rook. Is this a normal setup? Oh, I've just noticed my opponent's going for a normal setup. That's kind of funny. We're going to stick with the bishop strategy, though. Just put all the bishops down. Nice, sure. Okay, my opponent's definitely going for a normal setup. So I am going to add an extra battery pointing this way. Nice, and with that, we've put down all of our pieces, which also means that we get to move first. So my opponent, okay, that's so funny. Okay, the king and the queen are in the wrong spots, but for the memes, I respect it 100%. We're going to go ahead and start by getting rid of this bishop and trapping the rook. Oh wait, I could have trapped the queen. Whatever. We'll go ahead and take the rook. Okay, we'll take... And if my opponent doesn't do anything about it, I'm taking the queen on the next move as well. Okay, d5. Let's go ahead and take, boot the knight. We can also trap the queen this way, potentially. Okay, knight to a5 is just free. We'll go ahead and capture it. Still threatening to trap the queen with the bishop to c6. Okay, queen to d7 stops the idea, and there's no battery to take this rook. So, back to square one. Let's play this and hit the queen. We'll either force the queen back to her shelter, or, as my opponent just played, push her very far away from the king, which can also get a little bit sketchy. Let's play this to target c7, and there should be ideas of checkmate as well. My opponent says, I really want checkmate. Dubious sign. All right, we get pawn to e5. We're going to go ahead and take it. Still looking for that checkmate back here. King moves over, mate on b7. Okay, bishop to d6 stops that idea. It invites this. Actually, no, this is free. Okay, so I can take that because the pawn is actually pinned to the king. So we win a bishop and we bring more pieces into the attack. My opponent says hi to YouTube. That's quite funny. All right, we're going to go ahead and capture here on c7 with check. And after king to c8, bishop to b7 is, in fact, checkmate. With that, we win our second game. We are now 2.5 out of 3. Let's go ahead and move on to game number 4. All right, game number 4. We have 2 wins under our belt. Opponent places the king down right away. I'm going to go ahead and freestyle this one a little bit. I remember placing down rooks was quite fun, so I'm going to start with rook to h8, giving check, and then I'll also place a bishop on the long diagonal. I mean, as long as I know where my opponent's king is going to be, I might as well target it, so we might even go triple battery here with the rooks. Okay, that's actually free because of the pin. Let's go ahead and also put down a pair of bishops, and then maybe a queen here so we can look for checkmate as well. Okay, f3 is interesting. There's still ideas of taking back, and then taking. So let's do this, and then I might put my king right here on a8. Maybe a pawn or two for decoration to top it off. Okay, pawn to g3. Opponent going full pawn strategy, which should be relatively easy to dismantle with just a sacrifice or two. I might be speaking out of line, but I think it should be very possible. Let's go ahead and triple stack those rooks. One of these is probably destined to go on the side of the board on the first move, and then the rest are destined to give that checkmate. Okay, pawn to e3. Let's just stack some extra bishops. I really don't need any more rooks. I have a space for my king. Again, I might place a pawn here, but it's not of huge advantage to me either. And my opponent still has 30 points of material to work with. But it seems my opponent is going to stack a whole bunch of pawns, which may not be terribly effective. Let's go ahead and add some more bishops. And considering my attack is pointing this way, I am actually going to triple battery my bishop this way and then put the king here. Since we're only allowed to place as far as the 3rd rank, my opponent can't place any pieces that actually give check on the first move. All of my opponent's pieces have to land on some of these squares. So I'll go ahead and place my king right here on c8, and I feel pretty good. I think I'm in a decent position for a strong attack. Sure, my opponent going for the trusty pawn strategy, and then I'm assuming filling this up with a bunch of, I guess, minor pieces. All right, we get to move first, and we did have that advantage that our opponent placed the king down first. We just have to calculate this correctly. Let's see. Takes, my opponent will take back. Take with check, my opponent will take back. Take with check, my opponent will take back. Take, rook to g2 blocks it. If we take on h3, we're threatening rook takes h2. And there shouldn't be a way to stop that. So we'll go ahead and sacrifice. I apologize if that was a little bit difficult to follow along for, but it's basically forcing. If my opponent didn't take back, there was checkmate on h2. So we should be able to see that entire line played out exactly how I calculated it. We'll take with check. Really no choice here. Oh my goodness, rook to g2. Okay, if my opponent had taken back, then we would have had that really interesting variation where the rook would also be on g2. And because it's pinned, rook takes h2, king g1, rook h1 is checkmate. But my opponent decides to block with the rook prematurely, which means this battery allows me to take it for free. We're still going to take on h3, and this is similar to the line that we calculated with something of a similar mate. Okay, f3 traps my bishop. I guess I could just win the exchange. I could also just take on h2. I'm going to start by taking the exchange. I'd imagine that's always a good idea. Sure, we'll take on h2. We're threatening this capture. Not to mention we're threatening this as well. Potentially sacrificing for checkmate. Okay, pawn to f4. We'll go ahead and sacrifice the bishop. I love this game. I mean, it's extremely dynamic. I do prefer this bishop strategy over the pawn strategy. Pawn strategy was far too slow for me personally. I'm going to take with check. And I do like that we threw in the rooks as well. I feel like these were handy dandy for actually finishing off this game. Let's see, how do we win this? Let's just take. Okay, bishop to g4 is check. We'll just move the king out of the way. Rook can't even really come to the open file because it's covered by the bishop. And the other thing is these pawns seem to be just a hindrance, right? They block your own pieces. Nice. Okay, with that, we win game number 4, and that is our 3rd victory on the board. What I was saying about the pawns is that they seem to be a hindrance because if your opponent breaks through one little part of those pawns, these pawns can neither come over to your rescue nor can they promote fast enough, and they end up just kind of blocking your own pieces. So maybe it has a little bit to do with your particular play style, but it's just not for me. Let's go ahead and move on to game number 5. Game number 5, we have 3 wins under our belt. We get to move first, which I'm not really happy about. I'm going to put down a random pawn. Oh, you've got to be kidding me. My opponent does the same thing. Okay, let's go bishop strategy since we don't know what else to do. We'll go ahead and grab both of the long diagonals. Oh, interesting too that my opponent's putting the pawns on the 3rd rank, which might actually just mean that they're going for the 2nd rank and they're just doing it backwards, which is totally fine. Let's place down some more bishops, staring at all of these pawns. And if my opponent is going to place a whole bunch of pawns on the board, I'd imagine there's some advantage to having rooks as well. Because if my bishops sacrifice, or rather if my bishops sacrifice and there's no other piece that can go in through that hole that I've created, then I didn't really do much for myself. Let's go ahead and stack. Oh, and I've used a pawn. Okay, so I will place my king. Ugh, I don't really want to place my king anywhere, to be honest. But I guess I'll place my king on this side, since I have more bishops on this side, which I might end up sacrificing. And as far as the last pawn goes, I mean, I don't even know. I don't want to place it here because it blocks my rooks, but if I place it anywhere else, it blocks my bishops. Let's just place it on e2. Maybe it can stop an attack in some future. And we've basically left it up to our opponent to place the rest of their pieces now. All right, clearly we've got the double pawn stack going on. And, oh, knights. Okay, that's a first. I don't think I've ever seen the double pawn stack and then a bunch of knights. But it actually leaves my opponent with 1 extra point to spare that they have not utilized. Okay, and the game starts just like that. This will be a lot more of a headache to break through, I feel like. Okay, you know what? We're going to start with e4 and kind of tempt the waters by placing a pawn in the middle. We'll play h4 as well. I'd like to stop this pawn horde as much as possible. We get knight here, maybe looking for knight to g4. I should probably find a way to break through on the king, the queen side, on the side that the king is on, which is called the queen side, as fast as possible. Kind of like I did in the last game. So let's do a little rook lift. Ooh, knight goes back, very passive. And then I'm probably going to put these bishops in the middle so they can actually point in the direction that I need them. So let's place this bishop here. Ooh, opponent is spamming the knight rather back and forth. Can I sacrifice already? Takes. No, it's too early. Let's go to move this bishop back. Maybe bring in the next one. If my opponent ever tries to stop it with c5, there is some ideas of e5, but I don't have strong enough battery for that yet. So I'm going to do this first. And I'm basically just going to line all of my pieces like turrets, staring at my opponent's king. Okay, I don't think this strategy is going to pay off. It's going to give me way too much time to just set up all of my bishops exactly where I need them. I'm going to even set up my rooks if my opponent gives me the extra time. Sure, let's line up the rooks. And this is just full sacrifice mode at this point. Okay, f5, probably a little too late. Let's go ahead and line up the last bishop. And at this point, we're just looking for sacrifices. Okay, b5 obviously hits the bishop. If I take, My opponent takes. Whoops, terrible arrows. Oh my goodness. Every single episode, there's one terrible arrow. Okay, opponent takes back. I take. My opponent takes. There's mate on a7. So I'm going to go ahead and sack the bishop for at least a single pawn with the idea of breaking down my opponent's defenses. Oh, my opponent does take. Okay, we take with check. And then forced mate. Nice. Okay, that was pretty straightforward. With that, we win our 4th game, which was game number 5. I think that worked out pretty neatly. I like this kind of combination of spamming bishops and then adding like a rook or two just sprinkled in. Let's go ahead and move on to game number 6. All right, game number 6, we get the black pieces, which I'm actually quite happy about because for our, oh, that's so good. Now I'm even happier because we get the king down first. And for our specific strategy, that is golden. With any luck, our opponent will just put down a bunch of pawns, and we get to repeat the same thing. We've rinse and repeat for what we've done for the last 3 games. Okay, my opponent puts down a bishop, which is interesting. Let's go ahead and put down a bishop of our own. I will definitely triple stack, which my opponent simply cannot do with the king on that square. So we automatically have more pressure. Of course, a pawn could be placed and defend it. But we'll repeat this sort of idea with more bishops around that point to the squares adjacent to the king, and then also stack maybe a triple battery of rooks. Oh, and my opponent expends 9 points on a queen, which is usually not capable of returning on that investment. It's usually too much of an investment. We'll play rook to a6, stack more pieces. Problem is, this bishop is also trying to defend this and that at the same time. Usually not the best place to be. Okay, we get pawn to b3. So, okay, if we have a pawn on b3, maybe I shouldn't stack the bishops up here. I'm not sure, though. Let's play bishop to b7 and at least have one bishop pointing at that queen. Okay, pawn to d3 doesn't seem to do much. Let's add a couple more bishops, probably a bishop here and a bishop here. And I'm assuming the king should just land on g8. Sure, defensive pieces, I guess defending b2. We have 6 more points to work with. Our opponent has 11. And I'm pretty happy with how this setup has gone so far. I probably won't place any more bishops on this side. This bishop is really just decorative to hit the queen. So where should I place the rest of the bishops? Maybe on f8. Let's place a bishop, no, on e7. On e7 to defend f6 and to target a3 at the same time. And I kind of like to have an extra rook. But I don't have enough points. Okay, scratch that. No extra points for another rook. So the last bishop, I guess the last bishop, I'll just place it on f7 with the idea that we might be able to take this pawn if this rook is removed and this pawn is pinned to the king. Okay, pawn there. Let's just put the king on g8, covered by a bunch of nice, cozy bishops. And there's no open file because of that pawn on g3. Opponent has 8 more points to work with. Okay, rook to h3 makes some sense, coming down for that bishop on h7. And then knight on c2, we get to play first, which is huge. We could take here, we could take here. Those are like the 2 obvious choices. c3 seems to be more effective. We could even take here, honestly. Bishop takes back, we take with check, rook takes, we take, pins the rook. I like that best. Let's take on a3 first. Grab the most amount of material advantage we can from the very get-go. Okay, we take with check. Somebody has to defend the king, and then eventually that either loses the bishop or the pawn right behind it. Okay, rook on b2, sure, I'll take. If bishop takes back, I might not even bother recapturing. I was going to play rook takes a2, but we get king to b1 instead. Let's go ahead and, I can't take. Okay, let's take with the bishop. And this should be totally crushing. Okay, knight takes back, we'll take with the triple stack of rooks. I haven't even had to sacrifice anybody so far, and I was kind of ready to do that. We'll take here with check, defended by the h7 bishop. Opening up the position, and I have too many pieces that work very optimally in open positions. We'll play check. Doesn't even really matter what order I play this in. And with that, we do get checkmate. Nice. That was game number 6 and our 5th win. I've really enjoyed setup chess. I'd love to play more of this. Anyways, if you guys enjoyed this video, please consider liking and subscribing. Let me know down below if you guys enjoyed setup chess, and I will see you guys in the next one.